Welcome back. I'm Jeremy with Desert Tsunami, and in today's tutorial we're going to start looking at things that don't necessarily have to do with the engine, but definitely have something to do with your game project. So, per the last video, as far as I was concerned, I'd move anybody up at this point to a more intermediate level. You know how to make a pretty basic game, and that's good, but when we want to start making something that's a bit larger, we need to understand our file structure, where things are going, where things live, what each folder is used for. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. We're also going to be looking at some best practices on setting up your project folder and the difference between your project folder and your game folder. So, right now, we are just kind of looking at our engine. What we want to do is we want to go to the folder that our game folder is living in. So I'm going to open up my File Explorer. And for me, sorry, this folder is a bit of a mess, but for me, this project we've been working on lives right in here in tutorial. So when I click on that, this takes me into my project folder. Now this is different from our game folder. Our project folder is where we want to put things like music we may be working on. I'd put our sprite save files in here and our exported sprites, other resources, tile sets I might be working on. So as we go through it, we're going to start filling this folder out. The only folder that's in here right now is our game folder. So if we double click on this, this brings us to the file that our game is actually working on. Now we don't want to put everything that our project has in it in this particular folder. It will make this folder way too big, and when you get ready to deploy it or ship it out, it's just more stuff you have to deal with. So let's go through each of these folders and see what they all do and what's in them. Our very first folder here is our audio folder. So let's go ahead and double click on that guy. Open him up. What we have in here is 4 types of audio. We have background music, background sounds, music effect, and sound effects. Now we did see all of these in our event editor. So let's go in here and see what's going on. When we double click on these, for a lot of the times, almost any computer you're on is going to have to work on it for a bit. These aren't the easiest files for a computer to pull up, but it will eventually get there. So let's give it some time. So what we have in background music is all the music that is stock in the engine. So let's look over here at town2.ogg. If we come over here to our sound test and we're under BGM, we can see town1. So it's going to be the exact same thing right here. Now, one thing to notice here, to pay attention, is that none of these say MP3. They don't say WAV on them either. RPG Maker runs off of .ogg sound files. There's quite a few different ways to convert these. There are online converters, or if you're using a sound editing program like Adobe Audition, or I believe Audacity can do it as well, you can convert it over to a .ogg. The same thing is going to happen in all of our other ones, in the BGS, the ME, and in the SE as well. It's going to take a little bit of time here. There we go. That wasn't nearly as long. So we have all the same things in here. So these are just all of the sounds that the engine's got in it. Now when you're making new files to put in here, you'll know which folder that it needs to go in. So think of your victory music, for instance. Victory music isn't a background music. It's also not a background sound. It's actually considered a music effect, or an ME. So anything like that is going to be popping up in here. So if we look for victory, we've got our victories right here. Or if we want a fanfare after a fight, we can do that as well. And the sound effects is going to have exactly what you expect in it. The different sound effects that the game has in it that may not necessarily be tied to any kind of animation or attack effect or anything. These are going to be things like applauses, different types of attacks, different types of blows. What else do we have in here? We have some healing. So any kind of sound effect that your game is going to make is going to show up in here. Okay, the CSS folder, we don't really need to worry about this one unless you are adept at coding. I would just leave this one alone. Same in here for data. For the most part, you'll just kind of want to leave this guy alone. Okay, effects. Now the effects is what the animations became. So if you're working in RPG Maker MV, for instance, you won't see an effects folder, you'll actually see an animation folder. They're basically the same thing. One of the big differences between the two engines is that RPG Maker MV, all of its animations are using a frame-by-frame animation style, where MZ is using a, I guess called Effect Seeker. It's a particle system that it's using now. So making animations in MZ, you'll typically be using a different program and bringing those animations in. However, you still can make a frame-by-frame animation in MZ if that's what you want to do. Over here in fonts, any type of font that your game needs to use, you'll put it in here. It uses pretty much the same font file or format that every font type uses. So you'll just dump it in here and your engine will know, hey, that's a font that I can use. And then you have to go change that in System 2, I believe. Icons. This is just the icon for your game. So when you start playing your game, a little icon pops up down here on your taskbar. This is the icon that will pop up. Of course, you can change this, and we're gonna be going through the okay, well, my dog just knocked something over. We're gonna be going through the standards of different images and whatnot a little later on. So just know that if you have a custom icon you want for your game, it's gonna go in here. Over here in images. Now for the vast majority of you, you're probably going to live and die by this particular folder. So let's go through each of these one by one and I'll explain them. It seems like a lot, but don't worry too much about it. Battle backs. So you know when you play a old school RPG or even a newer one, because Clair Obscur does this exact same thing. It kind of whisks you away into a battle zone or a battleground of some sort. That's exactly what this is. Battlebacks 1 is typically your floor or your foreground, however you want to think of it. We've got a ton of stock ones in here. Battleback 2 is typically the background, the actual background. So your different walls, if you have skies for instance, let's open this guy up. If you need a sky with some mountains, we've got that here as well. Characters. Now this is where all of your walking sprites are going to go. So if we look right here, People 4, we can see that we've got 8 different sprites here and 4 different orientations, and they all have a walking animation on them. So any character that you're exporting into the engine will come right in here into your character folder. If we look at the top, just to point this out to you for now, we do have some sprites that don't seem to be following the rule of the other ones. These are much larger, and instead of them going from left to right, they seem to be going down. This is just to give you an extra frame, and it's something that we're going to get into a bit later. I think this is more of a advanced technique and just of the way that we can use these. Okay, enemies. We've actually got two different type of enemy folders in our game folder. This particular enemy folder focuses on the front view battle. We're going to see a lot of these same enemies again when we look at the SV enemies. So any enemy image that you want to use, you'll put it in here, especially if you're using a front view battle system. For our faces, these are coming right out of the character generator, just like our walking sprites. And they're pretty much set up kind of like the walking sprites. You've got one face per character, and they're set up in 2 rows of 4. We're going to go through eventually how we can set this up in both the engine and how we can do it a little bit more custom like in a program like Photoshop or GIMP or whatever the program is that you're using. Well, hopefully you understand the program you're using, because I'll be using Photoshop. Alright, parallax maps, or just parallax, sorry. Not parallax maps. We are nowhere near that point yet. These are just typically backgrounds that you can use for your maps. So maybe you don't need to cover up the entire map with tiles, and you do want them to overlook an ocean with this nice little island here. We can actually set tiles up over this. So this is essentially something that lives behind your tiles and can make your maps look a little bit different, a little bit prettier, however you want to look at them. We'll get into using these as well. Pictures. For those of you who want to make a visual novel using this program, you're gonna live and die by this particular folder. Any bust image that you have for your character is going to be dropped into this folder. And as you can see, we've got quite a few of them in here already. Alright, moving on. SV Actors. This folder is containing all of the animation data or sprite data for a more classic looking Final Fantasy like battle system. So if we open one of these up, we can see that there are 6 rows of 9 characters here. There are actually 18 different animations in here. Once again, there are different standards and things that we have to look at, which we'll get to a little bit later. This particular video is just an overview of our file structure. Alright, over here in SV Enemies. As mentioned, a lot of these are the same enemies that we've already seen. I don't know why they split up the 2 folders, but if you're using a side view battle system, you're going to pull enemies from out of here. If you decide to put extra enemies in here, just keep in mind what battle system it is you're using. Are you using a front-facing one or a side view one? Alright, our system. System holds a lot of important things in it. Your game over screen, the RPG Maker splash screen if you want to use that, different shadows. We also have our weapon animations. Now weapons 1 and weapons 2 are pretty much predefined. Of course we can change these images if we want to, but that takes understanding a what do you call those things? An image editing program as well. Once again, like Photoshop, GIMP, there's a few others out there, I just can't think of them off the top of my head right now. Weapons 3 though, this one is mostly this one's for you. They left it mostly blank so the developer can place their own weapon animations in here. The big one that you're probably going to be paying most attention to is going to be your window. While we're looking at this, these are the different types of colors that your engine can use. So if we want to change text to one of these colors, we can do that. We have our border here, we've got our background. There's quite a few different things in here that we will be looking at a later video. but for the most part, the things you'll really be paying attention to are going to be your border, your background, and probably your colors. Okay, let's hop out of system and come over here to tile set. Now we've talked about the tile set quite a bit. I think it's been touched on in at least half of the videos prior to this one. Every single tile set image that is in your game is going to pop up in here. So if you need to add a new tile set, you'll place it in here. Of course, name it appropriately so you understand where it needs to go. If you make a new one that's, say, city, do you necessarily have to name it city B? Not necessarily, but this will help you. Naming it with a B or a C or a D or an A will help you place it in the correct spot when you're placing it into the engine, so you know what tab that it needs to be on. But really, the only tiles I'd say you have to really keep an eye on as far as making sure they're in the exact right place is going to be your A1s and your A2s. That's pretty much it. Okay, titles. Now, we tinkered with the titles a little bit earlier when we changed the title screen. And that's all these are. These are just images for the title screen. One thing you're really going to want to pay attention to is this. You can drop a new title in here. You can drop your custom title in here. That's absolutely fine. The engine doesn't care what type of, or what the art looks like, or anything. But there are two things that you should definitely pay attention to. One of them, RPG Maker only accepts .png files. It only accepts .pngs. So JPEGs are out. I don't think anybody even uses a TIFF anymore, but TIFFs are out. SVGs, those are also out. So PNG is all you've got. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The other thing to pay attention to is the dimension of these pictures. So if we open this guy up and we look at the details, we can see right here in dimensions, it's an 816 by 624. This is important. Let's go back to our engine very briefly here. Just close that. Come over here to our database, and right now we're in System 2. Our screen width, 816, and our height, 624. 816, 624. So, if you decide to change the dimensions of your game or the resolution of your game, make sure that these pictures are going to match that. RPG Maker can stretch these out, but it can only do it to a point. This is also going to affect the battle backs as well, because the battle backs are the exact same dimensions as these things are. So if you change it to a 1280 by 720, make sure that any title screen that you put in here is also a 1280 by 720. It'll make your life a lot easier. Trust me on this one. Okay, and lastly, we have titles too. These are just the borders. You don't necessarily have to use these, especially if you're making your own title screen. You can just put a border on there before you even dump it into titles. You don't have to have a titles 2 on there. You can just have titles 1 and be done with it. Oh, okay. That was just the images. So, let's go back and look at the remaining folders. Our JS folder. This is another one of those folders that right now we're probably not going to touch very much, but the one folder in here that you definitely want to pay attention to is our plugins folder. So if you bring any plugins into your game, they're going to be put in here. So you find that .js file and you'll copy it into here. We are definitely going to be covering getting new plugins into the engine at this level, but not at this video, or in this video. At this video makes no sense. So in this video, or at this level, we will talk about installing plugins. Alright, it's back out of here. Movies. The engine doesn't come with any movies pre-installed, probably a good thing. If you have any special animations or video that you've edited together and you want to put it in here as a movie, say like your ending text, or you just have an FMV that the game needs to play, they'll be placed in here. There's really not a lot to go over with the movies. I'll probably say this again later, but I'm just going to get this out of the way right now. There are two things that you have to remember about movies. One, make sure when you render out your movie, it is the exact same dimensions as your game. So, if your game is sitting at, once again, a 1280 by 720, you render that movie out as a 1280 by 720. If the movie is, what's the default? 816 by 624, then render the movie out at an 816 by 624. Okay? That's number one. Number two, you have to have two different file formats in here. So the movie needs to be in both MP4 and WebM. Both of those have to exist and they have to share the exact same name. So if you have a movie that is named Skittles.mp4, then you have to have a movie in here named Skittles.webm as well. Okay? The engine will look for both of those. If they don't exist, the movie will not play. Okay, moving on. Saves. This is just where the engine saves its games. Even when you deploy it, this is where it's going to save. It doesn't save it in documents, doesn't save it in downloads, it saves it in the game folder under saves. Okay, the last three files here, the game.rmmz project, that is your actual project. So this is literally this. Let's go on and show you. Let's close this guy down. Yeah, we can save it. I've got nothing up. And if I double click on this, it's going to open up my game project. This is going to be important. When RPG Maker will always open up the last project that you had open. So if you're working on multiple projects, this may be a way you want to open up your projects. Of course, you can always go to File and Open Project and then go navigate through a bunch of stuff to find it. Personally, I like to do all that stuff outside of programs if I can help it. Your index, this is nothing to worry about. Same with your package.json. Alright? And that's pretty much the file system of RPG Maker. As I mentioned before, getting things into your images is going to be the most important thing. Your images and probably your audio. Can you do this in the engine itself? Yes, you can. The way you would do that is you come over here to the resource manager and you decide where it needs to go. But as we're looking at this, we've already seen all these folders. We know where all this is. So if we want to import in a BattleBack 1, for instance, and we hit import, it wants to bring us to this folder so we can click on it. Or we'd have to navigate to a different folder, find it, and then the engine will bring it into here. Honestly, that's kind of cumbersome. So it's much quicker and much faster to understand what these folders are, what they hold, and why the engine's looking at them. It's much easier to just dump a BattleBack 1 into the BattleBack 1 folder than it is to go through all of this stuff. Okay? And that's pretty much the reason why we did this today. With that said, I think we're done with this particular video. In the next one, we're going to be jumping back into the event editor, and we're going to cover shops because I realized we didn't really go over shops last time, And it's not so much that they're difficult to do, there's just more things to think about really if you're going to make a whole project in this. So we're going to cover shops, and then we're going to talk about a few other things about setting up our project folder to actually get it ready for making the fullest scale game that you can. With that said, as always, if you like these tutorials, please like and subscribe and share it, and hit the notification bell for pretty much every Sunday when these get uploaded. Otherwise, I think we're all done. So, with that said, keep playing and keep creating. Bye for now.